April 2020. At the exact moment the world shut down, airports looked like ghost towns. Passenger wide-bodies were parked wingtip to wingtip, airlines were bleeding cash, and the Boeing 747, the most famous passenger airplane ever built, was being written off as a dinosaur that had finally run out of time. But that same month, something almost absurd happened. In the middle of the night, 747 freighters started flying more, not less. They were hauling masks, ventilators, test kits, pharmaceutical supplies. Entire global supply chains ripped out of their normal routes, suddenly forced into the sky. And while passenger airlines were grounding the queen of the skies, cargo operators were quietly printing money with it. So here's the contradiction. If the 747 is obsolete, why did the world need it more than ever, the moment everything went wrong? Why are companies still paying a premium to keep these jets flying? And why does the 747 expose a cargo loophole that modern aviation, with all its fuel-efficient twin-engine miracles, still cannot close? This is the story of why the 747 won't disappear and the cargo loophole that keeps the Queen alive. To understand the 747's second life, you have to remember what it was supposed to be. In the late 1960s, Boeing wasn't building an airliner. They were building a statement, a jet so big that airports had to change for it, a plane so iconic that it became shorthand for international travel itself. But buried inside the glamour was a design choice that would save the 747 decades later. Boeing didn't design the 747 as passenger only. They built it like a freighter that could also carry people. The floor beams were overbuilt. The fuselage cross-section was massive. And most importantly, the nose could open. That last detail looks small, but it's the reason the 747 refuses to die. Because when aviation moved on from 4 engines, the 747 didn't become useless. It became rare. And in cargo, rare equals valuable. For decades, passenger airlines dominated the 747 story, but even then, cargo was always lurking in the background. The 747 didn't just carry suitcases, it carried freight in the belly, and dedicated 747 freighters moved everything from fresh flowers to livestock to jet engines. Then the world changed. Twin-engine jets got absurdly efficient, regulators expanded long-range twin operations, airlines realized they could fly nearly the same missions with 2 engines instead of 4, using less fuel, requiring less maintenance, and fewer crews. Slowly, the passenger 747 empire collapsed, and the public watched it happen in real time. British Airways retired the 747, Qantas retired the 747, Delta, United, Air France, KLM. One by one, the Queen was escorted off the stage. By 2020, the passenger 747 wasn't just declining, it was being erased, so logically, the story should end there. But here's what makes no sense. Just as passenger airlines were running away from the 747, cargo carriers were doubling down. Not because they're nostalgic, not because they hate money, because cargo is a different universe. And the 747 has a capability that the modern aviation world quietly cannot replicate. That capability creates a loophole, one that turns an obsolete aircraft into a strategic weapon. Before we go deeper, it's worth asking the obvious question. If the 747 is so useful, why did passenger airlines abandon it so brutally? Because passenger economics punish empty space. A 747 is a flying city, but if you're not filling that city with people every single day, the math becomes radioactive. 4 engines mean 4 sets of inspections, 4 sets of spares, 4 sets of failure points, and a fuel bill that doesn't care whether your cabin is full or half empty. Then came the new twins, jets like the 777 and 787 that could fly long-haul routes with 2 engines, lower trip costs, and the flexibility to match demand. Airlines didn't just want efficiency, they wanted the ability to right-size capacity, to fly more routes with fewer seats, more often. The 747 was built for an era of concentrated demand, huge banks of passengers flowing through hub airports at the same time. Modern travel fragmented, point-to-point exploded, premium cabins became smaller, and suddenly the Queen's greatest strength, sheer size, turned into a liability. Cargo doesn't have that problem. Cargo loves empty space as long as it's the right kind of empty space, because freight doesn't complain about legroom. It complains about cubic meters, payload limits, and door geometry. And that's why the same aircraft that became uneconomic for passengers stayed lethal for cargo. Nowhere is this clearer than in the difference between integrator cargo and general cargo. Integrators, the overnight express giants, run like clockwork. Packages move hub to hub at night, then get sorted, then pushed out before dawn. Their business is built on certainty. If a flight cancels, the entire network hiccups. General cargo is more opportunistic. It rides waves of demand, spikes around holidays, reacts to disruption, and fills capacity wherever it exists. The 747 fits both worlds, but for different reasons. For integrators, it's a high-capacity trunk line that can move enormous volume between hubs. For general cargo, it's the flexible sledgehammer you deploy when the world needs lift right now. That flexibility is the loophole, because it means the 747 isn't competing with just one replacement aircraft. It's competing with a whole ecosystem of logistics decisions, and until the ecosystem changes, the 747 stays. First, we need to talk about the single biggest misunderstanding people have about air cargo. Cargo is not passengers. Passenger airlines live and die by fuel burn, comfort, frequency, and punctuality. Every percentage point of efficiency compounds across thousands of flights. Every delay triggers angry customers. Every extra kilogram costs you money on every sector. Cargo airlines play a different game. They care about payload and flexibility. They care about what you can move. They care about how fast you can move it when the world panics. Because cargo doesn't just carry Amazon boxes. It carries the spine of the global economy. Pharmaceuticals, semiconductor tools, factory parts, humanitarian supplies, military equipment, even live animals. And when supply chains crack, cargo airlines become the emergency room of capitalism. Now, if your job is to be the emergency room, you don't always choose the newest tools. You choose the tools that still work when everything else fails, which brings us to the cargo loophole. And it's built on three brutal realities. Challenge number 1, outsized cargo. Most people hear freighter and imagine pallets. But the most profitable, most strategic freight in the world isn't a pallet. It's the stuff that doesn't fit. A helicopter rotor, a satellite container, a massive industrial valve, a power transformer, a race car, a complete aircraft engine shipped as a rigid piece. These are outsized loads, and they create a merciless constraint. If your cargo doesn't fit through the door, you don't have a business. Here's the problem. Modern twin-engine freighters like the 777F are phenomenal, efficient, reliable, powerful, but they still load through a side door. That means your cargo has to make a turn. It has to fit through the frame. It has to match the geometry of the fuselage while you slide it in and lock it to the floor. The 747 is different. Its entire nose opens. That one design choice doesn't just make the opening bigger. It changes the geometry of what is possible. You can load cargo straight in, long, rigid pieces that would never make the turn through a side door. The 747 can handle freight up to 185 feet long and 12.5 feet wide without bending it. You can handle awkward shapes without disassembling them. You can move cargo that isn't just heavy, it's structurally inconvenient. And that matters because in aviation, inconvenient freight is often the highest value freight. When a power plant is down and a country needs a critical component yesterday. When a factory is missing one machine that halts a billion-dollar production line. When a military needs rapid lift across the world. Outsized freight is the difference between "we can fix this" and "everything stops." And there are only a few aircraft on Earth that can do it at scale. The 747 is one of them. So even if a newer jet is better on paper, the 747 wins on one simple metric: can you load it, yes or no? And for outsized cargo, the 747 is often the only yes in the room. That's the first reason it won't disappear. But the story gets even more explosive, because the 747's outsized advantage doesn't just make it useful, it makes it irreplaceable in emergencies. When passenger capacity vanished during the pandemic, airlines didn't just lose seats, they lost belly cargo space, the hidden freight that rides under passengers on wide-body flights. That belly capacity is a huge part of global air cargo. Historically, around 60% of international air cargo flew in passenger belly holds. So when those flights stopped, the world didn't just lose tourism, it lost transport. Suddenly, dedicated freighters had to carry everything. And the 747, with with its giant volume, its payload, and its loading flexibility, became one of the few platforms that could surge. That surge behavior is the loophole, because aviation is optimized for efficiency in normal times, and the 747 is optimized for abnormal times. Challenge number 2. The economics are backwards. If you asked a random viewer which aircraft should be cheaper to operate, they'd say the newer one. Of course, new planes are efficient, old planes are gas guzzlers. End of story. But cargo airlines don't buy planes the way passenger airlines do. Passenger airlines often need new aircraft because passengers notice. Cabin comfort sells tickets. Fuel efficiency compounds across massive daily schedules. Cargo is quieter, less glamorous, and far more ruthless about accounting. Here's the dirty secret. Many cargo 747s are already paid for. The aircraft is depreciated. The capital cost is minimal. So the operator's real cost is mostly fuel, crew, maintenance, and keeping the aircraft available. That changes the math. Because when you compare a paid-off 747 to a brand new freighter, the question becomes, is the fuel savings big enough to justify a multi-billion-dollar replacement plan? Sometimes the answer is no, especially because air cargo is boom and bust. It rides on global trade cycles, e-commerce spikes, manufacturing disruptions, even geopolitics. A new aircraft locks you into financing, delivery schedules, training pipelines, and long-term commitments. A paid-off aircraft gives you flexibility. You can park it when demand drops. You can surge it when demand explodes. And that surge capacity is the hidden superpower. Aviation optimized itself for just in time. But when the system breaks, you need just in case. A big, blunt instrument that can move enormous volume at short notice. That's the 747. And when the world gets chaotic, just in case becomes priceless. That's the second reason the 747 survives. Challenge number 3. There aren't enough replacements. This is the reason the 747 era refuses to end cleanly. The 747 isn't surviving because it's perfect. It's surviving because the aviation industry is trapped. Cargo carriers are dealing with historic aircraft shortages, production backlogs, supplier bottlenecks, parts constraints, and engine programs that can turn into maintenance traps. So when a carrier wants to replace lift, it's not as simple as ordering new jets. You might wait half a decade or more. And while you wait, the world still needs cargo moved. That shortage has created a bizarre inversion. Older aircraft are suddenly valuable again, not because they're better, because they're available. This is why operators extend service lives across the industry. The same logic that keeps 2 old aircraft flying because the margins still make sense and replacements aren't arriving fast enough. It's not romance, it's math. And the math says, if you can't get new lift in time, you keep the lift you have. Even worse for anyone expecting the 747 to vanish, replacement programs slip. The Boeing 777-8F was originally expected to deliver in 2027. Now it's 2028. The Airbus A350F was planned for 2026, now it's second half of 2027. Certification timelines stretch, delivery slots become gold, so the 747 keeps flying because the exit door keeps moving further away. Now, at this point, you might think, okay, the 747 survives because it's the only option for weird cargo, because it's paid off, and because replacements are late. That's true. But it still doesn't explain the most ironic part of this story, because Boeing itself tried to end the 747 era. They ended production. They delivered the final aircraft in January 2023 to Atlas Air. They tried to close the chapter. And yet, the cargo world essentially said, no, not yet. Because the 747 isn't just an aircraft. It's infrastructure. Airports built cargo operations around it. Warehouses and pallet systems were optimized around its volume. Special handling procedures exist because of its door geometry. Maintenance ecosystems exist because it exists. So when you remove the 747, you don't just retire an airplane, you break a system. And that's the cargo loophole in full. The modern aviation world optimized itself for fuel efficiency and accidentally created a gap for outsized cargo, a gap for surge capacity, a gap for heavy lift that doesn't care about passenger comfort, and the 747 lives in that gap. So let's talk about the nuclear option, because every great aviation story has a moment where someone tries to slam a door shut. The 747's nuclear option is simple: stop making it. If no new 747s exist, the fleet ages out. Maintenance costs rise, parts become scarce, the aircraft fades away. That's the theory. But the real world doesn't obey neat theories. When demand spikes, old aircraft don't retire. They get resurrected. Stored airframes come back. Conversion programs become lucrative. expensive, leasing markets tighten, cargo rates surge, and suddenly the 747's retirement becomes a fantasy. Because cargo doesn't retire aircraft based on aesthetics, it retires aircraft when the margins die. Until then, every 747 is a tool that can still earn. And in aviation, a tool that earns doesn't vanish. It gets sweated, it gets extended, it gets pushed, which is why the 747's second life is not a victory lap. It's a grinding industrial reality. Keep it safe, keep it maintained, keep it flying. Because if you lose it too early, you lose capacity you cannot replace. So what would actually kill the 747? Not love, not nostalgia. The 747 will disappear when the economics finally get overwhelmed. Fuel prices, maintenance burden, parts availability, environmental pressure, noise restrictions, and tightening standards that make older aircraft more expensive to operate. And when the industry finally replaces it, it won't be one clean successor. It will be a patchwork. New build freighters for standard cargo, converted aircraft filling medium capacity, specialized solutions for the weirdest loads, and cargo networks redesigned around what's available, not what's legendary. The Boeing 777-8F offers 31 pallets and improved fuel efficiency, but it still loads through a side door. The Airbus A350F promises 40% better efficiency than the 747-400F, but it's smaller and also lacks nose loading. And when that happens, the 747 won't go out with a bang. It will fade, quietly, one route at a time, one retirement at a time. But until the world builds a true replacement for the cargo loophole, the Queen will keep flying. Because in aviation, obsolete doesn't mean dead. It means the market hasn't figured out how to live without you yet. And that is the real reason the 747 won't disappear.